You're listening to Simplifying Investing.
My startup journey goes back a fair way. All the way sort of going back to high school, I went to I was never sort of a book kind of guy, a textbook kind of guy. I learned the kind of textbook way. But I found myself in actually a school in Melbourne called Melbourne High School. It was at the time sort of number 1 or number 2 in the country in terms of TER. And
you're a Melbourne boy as well?
I'm a Melbourne boy, yep. Born and raised in the Yarra Valley in a place called Healesville, which is regional Victoria.
Great gin over there.
Yep, excellent. Yeah, you got the 4 pillars. But went to school obviously in the city. And education was something that was critically important to my family. My dad's from a European migrant background. And look, to be honest, I struggled at school, but I still did reasonably well when I was able to sort of put my mind to it. After school, kind of the pathway at Melbourne High School is university. It's kind of Monash or Melbourne, and they're kind of the 2 pathways forward. I took a gap year, which was quite abnormal for people that had come out of my school, and I got some experience in the real working world, and did sort of everything from 24-hour toll road call centers through to like working in a pharmacy on the weekend, and worked really, really hard to, build some savings coming out of school. And eventually I decided to go back to university, and it was really apparent that within about 6 months it wasn't for me. So sort of traditional or typical founder profile, dropped out of university, much to my parents' distress, and ended up taking on a role at a business at the time called iSelect. It was a marketplace for insurance services, and it was very early stage, and started at the very, very bottom, working on the phones, selling health insurance, something that I'd never really understood, let alone then had to sell to people that were 2 or 2.5 times my age as a 19-year-old kid, and figured out that I had a pretty good knack for sales, and really gave a damn about the customer, and worked incredibly hard to work my way up at iSelect, and got into the right company with the right mentors, and learned a lot about leadership, a lot about business, a lot about sales, dealing with adversity, complexity, solving business problems in the real world, and doing it in a kind of fast-paced environment. And you could probably say I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I loved that. And kind of my love of startups and everything that comes with it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, followed suit.
You mentioned iSelect there. They had those pretty iconic ads back in the day, and I think they actually focused on the call centers too. So
it was a really key point of difference, I think, for us in terms of not only having a call center and having a sales-focused call center, but building a capability within the business that went beyond technology. And we did very, very well. And look, over time that business had its challenges, but the founder, Damien, and I still keep in contact. He's gone on to start a number of different businesses since, and an incredibly smart dude I learned a lot from, and I had two mentors in particular there. Interestingly enough, I've just come off the back of helping my mentor, who was the COO at the time, start her own startup, and just give her advice and around going out to raise capital and where to start and who to speak to and sort of how to approach it, review decks. And it's so interesting to see that someone that taught me so much about business and people and life at such a young age, that kind of the shoes on the other foot, or the tides have turned, and I'm able to now share back some of my experiences over the last 15 years, working in startup, but more intensively the last 10 having started my own startup and founding Proper in 2017. And then obviously now building Citro from what was largely a piece of paper when I got it, a piece of strategy on a piece of paper, to what is now a membership and a platform for Australians over 50 with more than 300,000 members.
There was this great analogy that James Ayres had back in this article on, the Aussie fintech scene being, a scene of herbivores and carnivores, right? And it's like either you're going to disrupt the banks, and eat their lunch, or you're going to work with them. But I think we've come so far in our approach and attitude towards startup innovation in this country today that, it's no longer a sort of a fight or flight situation anymore.
And look, I think, AMP is obviously a bit of a testament to that, right? Having sort of lent really into startups and, going on the Citro journey. I continuously am impressed by the startup ecosystem in Australia. There are certainly some challenging parts about it. The sort of the regulatory environment, particularly in fintech, the complexity in regulatory environments in prop tech being state regulated, and that was something we faced. It was quite a significant problem at Proper, and obviously just the population size and lack of density in this country that makes particularly businesses like Proper, but also, raising capital out of Australia more challenging. Proper was my first real experience at raising capital on my own. And I think when we started the business, the environment and climate was quite different. And, VC capital or investing in high growth businesses like what Proper was, which was a tech-enabled property management and property maintenance service provider challenging the traditional local agent, was quite healthy. And that shifted over time, particularly post-COVID, for those types of businesses.
It's quite interesting because I think that real challenge that you faced into about trying to raise capital and maintain that competitive edge, at least within the Australian startup scene and getting in front of VCs, getting in front of those who could actually, help fund your aspirations and get you to that next round. I think so many of the startups that I'd sort of seen and spoken to directly over the years, they end up having to pivot and almost kind of look at, yes, we had this great idea, but then, we're constrained by the fact that, the real target audience or the market's over here. And so actually, if we want to bring this to life, we're no longer a B2C, we're a B2B now. And then, and so they have to almost kind of shift and adapt accordingly as well.
What's the old saying? Necessity drives innovation, and necessity to survive will often be largely the drivers for a lot of those pivots. Sometimes there's a great opportunity that you're pursuing, but in more often than not, from the founders that I've spoken to, it's come about as a result of needing to change direction, change the commercial model, pivot the product based on customer feedback, or lack of growth. And that certainly has happened for us at Citro. That has happened for me at Proper. And I think if you haven't gone through a pivot, you're probably not talking to your customer enough, even in the smallest way. And I think that's all part of the journey and part of the fun. I think that's what I love doing. I haven't met a founder yet. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I haven't met a founder of an Australian startup that is raising capital, particularly from VCs, that enjoys raising capital. And I think that for me, that was a new experience. And it was certainly a difficult experience. We raised many rounds of capital over a number of years, and we had some great investors. We got very lucky, albeit the business did end up needing to be wound up. But we had some great investors that really were highly supportive, and I don't think everyone gets that same experience, but it takes you out of the business for an incredibly significant amount of time. And we found ourselves on a cycle of raising capital for 3 to 4 months a year, and then spending, somewhere between sort of 8 and 9 months a year actually back in the business, and that being a cyclical yearly cycle. So challenging.
Well, I guess coming to Citro then, how would you describe Citro, particularly say to someone for the first time, and what does it stand for?
Really good question. I guess this was a really interesting venture because this was a strategy to support AMP's broader strategy around retirement. But I think one of the things that I've done since joining Citro just over 2 years ago, was really take a lot of inspiration from my parents who have recently gone through that transition from working hard to put food on the table and to give us kids a great life and a great education and all the privileges that we've been able to afford by living in this country, to now finally a time of their life where it's about them and them getting to enjoy things that they never did when we were kids. And I think as I've lent further into that, I've started to really find a very strong motivation for what we're here to do at Citro. And that continues to build over time. And, people like my parents or like the customers that we speak to really regularly and even bring into the office and actually employ for a full day through our Chief Customer Officer for a Day program. They give you a lot of inspiration and motivation to keep working hard and to keep building what we're trying to build. And so today, Citro is a community content and a rewards platform for pre-retirees. And so that age range is reasonably broad, but largely that sort of sees us focusing on customers between 50 and 60, 65 years of age. And I think where we play a really important role is on two sides, with two different elements for the customer. One is as you come into retirement age and you start to, or you're approaching retirement, you start to think about it a whole lot more. And it's almost like that there's this switch that goes off in people's heads when they turn 50. And it's like, I visualize this as kind of like running a marathon and turning that last corner, and you can kind of see the finish line. It's still a fair way down the road, but you can kind of
sweat and
it's dripping with sweat and the lactic acid settling in, and the legs are a little bit wobbly, like a baby deer or baby giraffe, and but you're really starting to give it a whole lot more attention, and you're not only sort of thinking about naturally the financial side of it, but you're also starting to think about the life side of it. And you've worked hard, and you've worked for a very long time. For a lot of these people, like my parents, particularly my dad, who was a migrant to the country, but worked from 18 through to, I think he retired at was 63. He was fortunate enough to retire a little bit early, literally a couple of months before COVID, which then drove him crazy. But life's changing a whole lot at that point. And there are a couple of key sort of, I call them moments of truth, that I think pre-retirees face into. One is their health. The things that you might have done when you were younger that you knew weren't great for you, stay out in the sun too long without the hat, without the sunscreen, things that maybe they didn't know back then, they start to catch up. And friends or family members or siblings, they start to experience health issues, and it really it puts a mirror up in front of people to start to look at their own health and what they can do about that. And that really starts with education, right? And often that's not sitting down and talking to your doctor. It's kind of reading and exploring on your own time, on your own terms. The other one is the transition away from having dependents. And, for the last maybe 18, 25 years, it's been Saturday morning sport, school fees, school uniforms, back to school, school holidays. Like, you don't realize as a kid how much your parents sacrifice for you. And that brings a lot of free time back into people's life, and they've got to sort of work out what happens when it's about them and not necessarily about their kids. And I think the last sort of moment of truth is stepping down or away from the workforce. And whilst, work is taxing and we're always looking forward to that next vacation, or, for some people they get to, their late 50s and start to really look forward to retirement. Work brings us a lot of purpose. It brings us connection. It brings us community. It brings us friendships. And stepping away from that environment is a really significant transition, like socially, let alone financially. And so I think there's a really important role for Citro to play in terms of helping people figure out, help people through these transitions, help people through these moments of truth, help them get access to the right information with content that's written exclusively for them as an Australian facing, retirement in the next maybe decade. And I find that that's a really cool purpose. The other side of it's a little bit more fun, which is the rewards side for our business. So the other side is we're a rewards platform, again, for Australians over 40, where Australians can earn cash back when shopping with Citro's partners. There are lots of cashback programs out there. I think there's a couple of key differences with Citro, namely, one, some of the partners that we have on the program are partners that are likely to be more interesting or needed by a community that's, in pre-retirement. We see a very high level of interest and discretionary spend on things like travel, but also, health partners as well, and helping people get access to, online services to support things like, hair loss or erectile dysfunction, or for females, menopause and education around menopause and different forms of treatment if they're not seeing their doctor or comfortable with seeing their doctor. But the second part of it is obviously how cashback rewards can be used to accelerate your retirement. And so Citro has a feature that's quite, I feel, unique, which is you can choose to either have your cashback rewards now or send them into your linked super fund as an investment and enjoy the benefits of compounding, in performance returns and all that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of ties the proposition back nicely to what we're here to help people do, which is get the most out of life and get the most out of life in retirement.
And I think that's so right, because, the one thing that really stands out to me is you look through, some of the, Treasury's findings on the fact that, the expected surge or boom in terms of the demographics, right? There's going to be, I think, in the productivity report of 2023, one of the findings was that over the next 40 years, 9 million Australians are going to enter into retirement, and by that stage, that's going to be a quarter of the population, and it's a staggering amount, and it's almost unprecedented. And I think the social and cohesive community aspect that you touched on earlier becomes so much more important for a subset of Australians who might not even want to talk about or think about their retirement to begin with, let alone look at solutions and how to make the most of it as well.
And I think that for Australians looking into retirement in the next, let's say, 10 years, their retirement is most likely going to look quite different to that of their parents, either because they're migrants themselves or the economy is different. The mechanisms for refunding your retirement are different. I talk about this a lot with our team or with partners, or even in the press when I've spoken to the press before, which is for my parents, who are largely my inspiration for Citro. Their parents did not have the retirement that they are fortunate to enjoy. And that will be even again quite different for me when I go into retirement. And so it's not like we can look ahead to that generation above or to above and say, okay, I kind of know what to do because I've been through it with my parents. Sure, there are some, common things that we're all going to face into, which is, a health and potentially deteriorating health. But we are living longer, we are healthier, we are more active than our parents were and our parents' parents were. And we're wealthier coming into retirement. And it doesn't mean we can sit back and, sit on our laurels and just kind of hope it will be all okay. We have to be, I think, for people as they are approaching retirement, be really active in their retirement plans, both financially and socially.
And it's interesting because, like my background, my parents were Ukrainian migrants too. I can guarantee, hand on heart, we did not sit around, the dinner table talking about retirement or, conversations around, estate planning. If anything, it was the last thing you'd want to talk about. And I think so for so many families, that rings true. You just put it on.
Yep, that's right. I think the only time that we spoke about retirement in our family as kids was if dad or mum won the lotto. It was always, I wish to win the lotto and retire on an island somewhere. And that was kind of a bit of a pipe dream. But now it's something that they're absolutely going through. And I think they're doing a great job. I've had the pleasure of being able to spend some additional time with my parents and helping them really enjoy life. And last year, I have a particular love affinity with Brazil. I've recently bought a place there.
That's cool.
And that is my retirement plan. It was actually not until that I started working for Citro that I started to really think about my retirement. And yeah, it's probably a little while away. Like I hope that it's not till 67 or 70, but I started to think about how would I want to spend the best years of my life? And for me, that is, part of my retirement plan. But for my parents, they didn't travel with a lot as kids. I think my mum's first trip overseas she was in her 40s. It just wasn't something as having a kid in your early 20s and, going through the recession that we had to have in the late 80s and battling through, I think interest rates are at 17 or 18%. My dad loves to tell me about this. And
probably still got the charts, right? Or the newspaper clippings from the time.
He would. But now they're at a stage of their life where they can enjoy. And so last year, they chose to join me on quite an extensive trip through South America and decided to make the most of the fact that they're both fortunately very healthy and fit and active. And they came to Brazil, saw what it was like, started to understand a little bit about why I love it so much. We went to Colombia, we went to Cuba, which was a long time dream of my dad's and mine, to see the classic cars. And, certainly there's some shocking things to see there, but it's a very interesting place in the world. They got to go to Chile and Peru, and we're planning a trip to Japan next year. And so, yeah, it's really cool that they get to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to just pick you up on one of the things you mentioned earlier, which is Aussies are living longer. They're probably now looking at a bit of a sea change to wanting to kind of shake things up as they approach retirement. One of the things that Citro released last year, which caught my eye, was the Retirement Destinations Guide.
Yep.
Would you be able to give us a bit of a quick recap of what the report found last year? This was your inaugural report as well.
And look, Citro has put out we put out different forms of content as free content to our community of pre-retirees, and everything from a podcast to short form digital content and these ebooks or guides. And we wanted to cover off property in some way. Like, thinking about where you're going to retire is obviously a really important decision. There are lots of factors. I think sometimes people can get a little bit of tunnel vision about where they may want to retire based on an idea that's maybe not as well thought through. Like, well, you're going to get a little bit older. You're going to need access to healthcare services. Moving around is going to be a little bit harder. Your kids aren't living at home anymore. There is that sense of community, and you're going to have to look for that sense of community to avoid things like loneliness, which has a really big impact on people's not only mental health but physical health. And so we wanted to tackle this topic. And so our editorial director at the time and our finance contributor, Nicole Pedersen-McKinnon, got their heads together and started to think about, well, what are the elements that people should be considering when they think about where they might want to retire? Beyond just like, I'd love to be in like warm weather near a beach or in the rainforest or in the bush and have no neighbors around me, which are all very common things that we hear about places people want to retire. And so we kind of narrowed them down to a couple of sort of key criteria. Naturally, affordability is one, access to healthcare services and, critical amenities that are around, things like food, not going too far to get your groceries, pharmacy, all that kind of stuff. Transport. So, how easy is it to move around and enjoy retirement? Is it purely by car, and is it long drives, or are there train stations and airports and buses and other ways of kind of getting around and seeing friends or family that might live not locally to you? And the other one, which was sense of community as well. And so as you get older, and even if you're a couple, and you may not have your friends or family around you, particularly if you choose to move, what's that sense of community like, and how are you going to be able to lean on that community and become part of that community and get enjoyment and purpose from, being involved in that community? And so we put those elements together with affordability and some real estate data from CoreLogic, and published Australia's top 30 retirement destinations.
Some of them were ones you wouldn't really expect to see on there as well. Like, it took me by surprise, right?
Yeah, so Armidale in regional New South Wales was last year's number one.
Yeah.
And Armidale hasn't had the same performance this year. I won't spoil it because we do have our second annual top retirement locations guide coming out very soon. And that's largely just due to, access to housing and supply. Those sort of smaller communities, have limited supply. Housing and the housing crisis that we are in is shouldn't be a shock to anyone. This year we're seeing in the data less people looking for outright sea changes and a little bit more of a balanced kind of set of priorities. But yeah, there definitely was some surprising locations in there. Although it wasn't surprising to me to see regional perform extremely well. And I mean, maybe that's just from my own experiences. My parents have chosen to go further regional, and not in a location that's rated in the top 30 or top 50 this year. But having seen their experience, you see the sense of community come through, I think, far stronger than perhaps what you see in, inner city suburbs.
Yeah, because we definitely saw that, I think, play out at least during the first or second, wave of COVID, when there was this real push away from the capital centres, as more and more Aussie families started thinking, well, actually, I can downsize, or not necessarily even downsize, but I can, change my current circumstances and move down the coast and somewhere that has got a bit more of that sort of, feel good lifestyle factor, and has got more amenity, and all the things that I can't get, where I am now, with affordability clearly being a big priority as well. That
post-COVID regional shift that we saw certainly did have an impact on the affordability of some of those places. And so the purpose of this guide now is to help open people's eyes to other locations that might actually outperform what they had in their mind when it comes to those sort of key criteria, and get them thinking about that, get them thinking about where it is that they may want to be as they approach retirement and are in retirement a little bit earlier, and start having those conversations with their family and their friends. This year, as a result of last year's success, the attention that we got from the guide, which was fantastic, it really highlighted how much of a demand there was for this content that was not out there, and this research-backed content that clearly pre-retirees were just, desperate for, and so we've taken our role a little bit more seriously this year with it. And, it's something that we know is a piece of content that people liked and got value from, real value from. And so we've doubled down on that this year and added some additional elements to it in terms of how we're going about the rankings and scoring.
Yeah, cool.
We've expanded it out to 50 destinations or 50 locations across Australia, with 10 of those locations being premium or slightly higher end or more expensive locations. And we've also included a whole customer element and case study element to it. So we've got 7 quite deep customer case studies of people who have gone through these transitions and talk about their experiences.
Yeah, great. No, I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. Ash, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.